Hello, I am Professor Dr. Deepika Srivastav from the English department. Today's lecture is for MA second semester students. The topic is the subjection of women. Before I commence my lecture, I would like to pay homage to the greatest dramatist of all time, and you, I'm sure, have guessed his name, William Shakespeare, whose birth and death day was on 23rd April. He was to English language what Kalidas was to Sanskrit language. You, as lovers of English, please join me in paying our tribute, salutations to his contributions to English literature and language. As they say, better late than never. Of course, I am late by a day, but as they say, it's always good to be late than never to be there for William Shakespeare. Now, my lecture on the topic of the subjection of women gives briefly the summary and analysis of the major themes of this essay. This is an extended essay by the great philosopher and writer whose name is John Stuart Mill. It is needless to say a path breaking work. Mill published this essay in the year 1969 in the memory of his late wife Harriet Taylor Mill. Mill was born in 1806 and he died in 1873. But during this span, he became a great British philosopher, a great political economist, as well as a civil servant. Therefore, he contributed heavily to social theory, political theory, and political economy. In the year 1830, he met a 22-year-old girl by the name of Harriet Taylor. Though they were in love, they did not marry till 1851. This was only after Taylor's husband had died. Unfortunately, Taylor too died in 1858, so it was a brief wedded life for the two people in love with each other. However, what is more important is she influenced Mill's subjection of women. She is solely responsible for influencing the great writer to write a remarkable essay on the freedom of women and to give them equal rights. So we can say that, like the way Valmiki's wife influenced Valmiki to write Ramayana, similarly John Stuart Mill also influenced him greatly. So you see, there are parallels between British culture, British history, British literature, and our Indian tradition. Coming back to Mill, let me tell you that he was a utilitarian and a liberal. All the time, Mill thought about giving equal rights to women as a mark of respect to his departed wife. At the time Mill wrote this essay, women could not vote. Unfortunately, they did not have any voting rights. Married women were not separate legal entities from their husbands. All their property, their wealth, their possessions, their jewelry, their property they owned in the city or they owned in the villages, they all came under the supervisions of their husbands. Sad, but this was absolutely true. A common justification for women's inferior legal status was that they were morally superior to men and so they should be kept inside the homes where they could lead a protected, peaceful life and shape life of the children, the future generation of the family and the future generation of Britain. Victorian society insisted that a woman's duty is to please and serve the menfolk, especially the husband, and to put the aims and desires on hold after they get married, after the women get married. All women were expected to attract suitable husbands for themselves and after they got married to raise children and to look after the children's interests and thereby to confine their activities, their interest to household affairs and activities. Now, this is what in India also people followed, the men folk followed. They did not like women leaving the home and going out to work. It is with great difficulty that now women have the liberty to work and earn for the family. Also, if you remember, Jane Austen's most famous novel, Pride and Prejudice, is based on this theme of marriage, and the heroine's mother, Mrs. Bennet, one and only aim is to get all her daughters married off to suitable grooms to see them settled in life, and the whole plot revolves around marriage and love, and it has become the greatest novel of all times. So, as I said, that this tradition in Indian households is not because of orthodox traditions. Even in Britain, which is supposed to be way ahead us, this tradition is followed, and the parents are only concerned about getting their daughters married off and dislike giving their daughters any share in their property, even before they are married or even after they are married. So the women had nothing to call their own and they were simply glorified housemakers. At the time of publication, Mill's essay caused outrage for its radical thinking and he wanted a change in the British setup. So nobody liked this idea. He is the most significant philosophers of the 19th century and his essay made a deep mark, an indelible impression in the Victorian society. He argues that subordination of women is wrong, completely uh, unfair and totally illogical as it promotes unhappiness amongst the women folk. Who will be happy in such uh, restricted atmosphere? So naturally the women also did not revolt but they did not like it one bit. And his argument, Mill's argument was that anything which makes women unhappy must be remedied, it must be removed. He was a thinker of his time and he thought that this is no way to treat women at all. So he advocated for gender equality, saying the nation can't progress morally or economically until we guarantee gender equality. That is a must for improvement, for advancement, for development. He accepts that his arguments are controversial, but all change is painful. We don't like any changes, but life is full of changes and it is the law of nature. We cannot deny it. Nothing can remain stagnant forever, and so a change has to come for the benefit of mankind, for the benefit of society. Mill says since men have controlled women, subordination is customary. Right from the beginning of civilization, it was a habit with men to take all the responsibility of the women folk, whether it is in the Western civilization or whether it is in the Indian civilization. So we should first give women same opportunities to better themselves. This was uh, Mill's understanding of the complexities in making women subordinates of their partners. Saying that men are physically stronger than women is not a solid argument at all. Just because women are supposed to be weaker physically, it doesn't imply that they are weaker mentally also. Women must have the same opportunity to govern themselves, to lead their own lives. He gives an example of a poor man who toils and he rises from the working class to the top class if he is working hard day in and day out. Similarly, a woman also can change her status in society if she works hard, provided she gets the freedom. If you keep her chained inside the four walls of the house, where will she get the opportunity to show that she is on equal standing with her man? Women are biologically and mentally different from men, but it doesn't imply that they are incompetent. Certainly, it does not mean that they are foolish and they cannot make their own decisions. Women become subordinates because they are taught this right from the birth. They have no sense of independence, and so just as you trained animals to obey, similarly, women are also trained to obey first their fathers, then their brothers, and after they are married to their husbands. In a free society, the capable will succeed while others will not. This is the most important thing he raises. In any society, whoever is capable, whoever is mentally, intellectually strong, he is going to rise. This logic appears to all, be it male or female. If you have the capability, the capacity to work hard, to show your prowess, then how can you be working under subordination? Mill criticizes slavery of all forms. He feels that in the Southern American states, slavery was rampant and the whites were keeping the Negroes as slaves. He did not like this one bit, and he said that talent and greatness are wasted when humans are forced into slavery. Anyway, he said that slaves were still better than the married women. Now, this is so unfortunate that the women are placed even lower in hierarchy than the slaves. He has an argument for this. He says that slaves used to work for their white masters for a limited period of time, say from morning till evening. After that, they were independent, they went to their homes, and then they were lords of all they surveyed, which is not the case with the British women folk who got married. They were docile and they were staying within the four walls of their married homes. So 24 hours round the clock, they were treated like subordinates by their husbands. If women are equals, Mill argued, they will stop being weak or docile. They will show their strength in all areas. They will be happier, mentally strong, and financially independent. So, it is important to give them equality, to give them the freedom to step out of the house, to work with men folk, to show their intelligence and not just be confined to the homes looking after their children. This will benefit society, this will benefit their homes, and this will become a big boon to the economy of the nation when men and women are partners in each and every sphere of life, in each and every phase of life. For this, what is most important is that women have to be educated. You have seen so many women getting married at the young age of 10, 12, even now, and they are very happy getting married at that young age. Now, naturally, once they are married, many pursue their higher education, many don't. And if they are uneducated, they can't discuss important matters or relevant issues with their husbands. So the husbands naturally don't pay any attention to whatever the woman is saying. If they want a major role anywhere, they have to be highly educated so that the husbands also treat them with respect. Otherwise, their views are left uncared for. Nobody listens. Uneducated women make dull companions and are unable to partake in intellectual debates. That was in the Victorian society, and they used to talk on frivolous topics like dresses, like makeup, like balls, like marriages, like finding suitable matches for themselves. Beyond this, they could not argue, and they never had the sense to say anything on political matters. Once gender equality is established, all around improvement from the home to the nation will be observed, was Mill's argument in favor of giving equality to women. Now, let us just ponder on the religion which was prevalent in those days. It also had suppressing ideals for the women. Religion has forced men to give up their wives. This is true. And let us not discuss religion here because it will become very controversial. But then, many men are instigated by the you can say the saints to give up their family life, to leave their wives, to leave their children and join full-time religious activities. So religion, the church, also dictated terms to men to leave their wives. Women have achieved equality gradually, and you see, men get disgusted with women having better qualifications, better jobs, better intellectual achievements than them. This was true then, and this is true even now. There is so much of problem in the adjustments between a couple if the wife is superior in whatever respects than her husband. The women in the Victorian era, if they didn't marry, then they were forced to enter convents. There was no other place. The parents did not like spinsters living with them. They were not married, and the only place open for them were the convents. Now, the children a woman had a woman raised unfortunately belonged to the husband and the husband alone. He had all power on them. And supposing the wife left the family or the husband, she left behind her children as well. Another thing I would like to mention here is that, that husbands could also forcibly bring their wives back. Divorce was not prevalent, and the parents, as I told you earlier, did not welcome a married woman back in their households. So the husband had all the power to do as he liked, and the children also, unfortunately, had to stay back with the father. Mill gives examples of many women who were successful in the male dominated sphere. To make his point clear, he gives the example of Joan of Arc, who was a great personality then, and today also she is treated with dignity, with honor, and with respect. Nobody can raise a finger at her. Let us look at Queen Elizabeth I, who was called the Virgin Queen. She did not marry, she refused to marry because she did not want any man to control her possessions. And so, all history students know how she ruled all by herself and ruled successfully well. Queen Elizabeth I. Even Queen Elizabeth, she has a long career. She is the monarch and she is known to be independent. She doesn't listen to much to her husband. Then he also quotes Queen Victoria, who ruled over England for around 64 years. So these are some of the names of very successful women of that era who did not like to be dominated by their husbands. And they proved that they are capable, even more capable, of the men, and many of them remained unmarried. Sometimes they also surpassed their husbands if they were married. Now, he explains the benefits of equality throughout this essay. Just as Mary Wollstonecraft, in a book, A Vindication of the Rights of Women, did earlier, about 70 years ago, and so many feminists have done it after Mill. Having said that, I will point out that this is not a lecture on feminism at all. I have not taken up anything regarding feminism. It is just a simple analysis of the extended essay of John Stuart Mill. Now, you have to read the essay yourself to comprehend the essence of his views, to understand why he advocated this, because until you read it yourself, the sense of this great work will not be very clear. Before I conclude, I would like to say that I adhere to his arguments and beliefs in totality. I would like to point out from 3 generations, my family has been claiming equal rights for ourselves. I will like to quote my mother, the late Srimati Sushila Prakash, who even in those conservative times studied, did her schooling, did her graduation and post-graduation, and got a government job as the principal of a college in those days when girls were kept in parda. So she fought and got equal rights. I will give you the case of myself. I lost my father when I was only a child studying in the 10th standard. But I had the will and the courage to continue my studies. I did my graduation, my post graduation, and immediately after my post graduation, I got selected as a lecturer in the glorious University of Allahabad, my alma mater. And I can proudly say that I've been a very devoted teacher, and I have always fought and stood for my rights. Similarly, I will also quote the case of my daughter, Miss Isha Srivastava, who was an excellent student and was successful in her first attempt in the prestigious civil services. She is a senior Indian Foreign Service officer, and she is also equally bright as her IFS husband, but she is standing for her own equal rights. So, and I hope this trend in my family of women fighting for their rights will continue long after I have gone. To conclude, we believe in equal rights not only in precepts but also in practice. I have always taught in my long career as a university teacher my lady students to always fight for equality. They should not consider themselves the weaker sex, and I'm glad that many of my lady students have listened, and they are always praising me for guiding them when they needed this guidance. So I, with these words, make a humble request to all and sundry, the men and the women, to give equal opportunities to all women, whether they are from your class, whether they are from the lower class, whether they are from the upper class. Thank you.